All right, let's go ahead and get started. Looks like we have a good audience here today. I'd like to welcome you to our Nuvi plus Nomensa webinar. My name is Scott, and I'm hosting us from here at the Nuvi headquarters in Lehi, Utah. We're really excited about our guests today. We have with us Simon Norris and Peter Kay of Nomensa, and I have a couple items of business just here to tell everyone. Yes, we are recording this. We will send the link to your email, as well as we will be posting this on our Nuvi YouTube channel. And Nomensa is also going to be posting this to their YouTube channel, as well as they have a SlideShare account. So if you want to jump on their SlideShare, you can find these slides. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them via the questions box here in your webinar broadcast, or you can also tweet questions to us at Nuvi, or you can tweet at Nomensa. It's at we_r_Nomensa. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a follow. Follow Nuvi and Nomensa at our proper social channels. We will always keep you up to date on all things social media, as well as all things UX and design. Without any further housekeeping or business, let's introduce our two guests today. We have Peter Kay. Peter is a background in intensive care nursing, which is a really interesting story we might get into today. He has a focus on sociology and psychology through his nursing degree, and after 10 years of that, he made a transition into social media. He's been doing social media for 10 years and has a really interesting perspective on crisis management, as well as alerts and understanding the social conversation and how it can affect your business and brand. Simon Norris is the founder of Nomensa. He founded it in 2001, has an academic background in human psychology, human biology, and cognitive science. And Simon is known for coining the phrase humanizing technology, which if only we realized how much that matters in 2001 as we do now in 2017. So without any further ado, let's get to our presenters and let them take the reins. And Peter and Simon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Scott.
Hi, everyone. So this presentation is going to be broken into three parts. Part one, we're going to look at the value of experience and what that means. I mean, today we're all aware of how digital is changing the face of business on a daily basis. And most importantly, the value that people now place on user experience. You only have to look at some of the world's leading unicorn brands and disruptors like Spotify and Pinterest and Slack, to name a few, who are using experience as a game-changing differentiator. Businesses have woken up to the commercial value of a great user experience. This means that designing a great user experience is now paramount to achieving digital success, to achieving social success.
In the next section, we're going to be looking at how you can get user experience and social to work better together. Really kind of focusing on how you can deliver a truly engaging online customer experience.
And then in part three, we're going to talk through some of the ways that we use social media monitoring here at Nomensa. We'll outline our T-analysis framework, as well as how we use Nuvi to inform our kind of UX research and design programs. I mean, ultimately, our focus is to sort of positively transform how our clients interact with their customers. So let's dive in with the value of experience. An experience occurs when a company intentionally uses services as a stage and goods as props to engage individual customers in a way that creates a memorable event. The term experience economy was first used in an article by Joseph Pine and James Gilmore in 1998. And what they were describing was something new and original. Prior to that, we were living in what was called a service economy. So the experience economy is the kind of next level on past a service economy. And what Pine and Gilmore were arguing is that businesses must orchestrate memorable events for their customers and that memory itself becomes the product or the experience. And this is pretty true today. Experiences are pretty important in all regards. I mean, that's kind of what everyone is really searching for. So, you know, to a certain extent, we're all living in an experience economy.
So theory is great, but let's put that into context. Let's look at a great example of a company that's firmly seated in the experience economy. Starbucks is a global brand. It's one we're all going to know, and it was recently valued at $86 billion. And they provide the total coffee experience. So from the beginning, Starbucks set out to be a little bit of a different kind of company, one that not only celebrated coffee in a rich tradition, but also brought a feeling of connection, a third place between work and home. In '81, when Howard Schultz first walked into a Starbucks store, from his first cup of Sumatra, Howard was drawn into Starbucks and joined the team a year later. The following year, in 1983, Howard traveled to Italy and became captivated with Italian coffee bars and the romance of the coffee experience. He had a vision to bring the Italian coffee house tradition back to the United States, a place for conversation and a sense of community. He wanted to bring the experience of European coffee houses to the States. Starbucks took coffee as a commodity and then turned coffee into an experience. So let's just kind of explore that for a moment. What you can see here now is an empty graph with competitive position on the x-axis and price on the y. The red line plots from a low price and weak competitive positioning to one of a strong competitive positioning and improved pricing. If you look where Starbucks began, with beans, you can see that that's down in the bottom left-hand corner. And what that represents is basically beans are a commodity. There's very little to differentiate one crop of beans from another. A bean is a bean, and selling them in their raw form is an extremely competitive market. The price is driven by supply and demand, and it leaves traders with very little that they can do to protect their margins. Everybody in that market is easily disrupted by cheaper suppliers. But as you begin to process coffee beans and package them, you start to differentiate from a pure commodity, and you begin to extend your competitive position as you're building value into your product. As you move beyond product and start to focus on the experience, what you're seeing is effectively they're protecting their position. And at every point, they expanded their competitive position. They were less exposed to the impact of undercutting competitors. So simply put, by focusing on the experience, they grew their margins and they protected their position. But Starbucks are not the only ones to do this. There are many brands that are following this approach, thinking and designing from an experience perspective.
So, with that in mind, we're all fans at Nomensa of the Gilmore Girls. And we wanted to kind of show one particular snippet to give a little bit of light relief. Hopefully you'll all find this clip funny. We do. And we've put it in here because it illustrates a point that is painfully true. So let's watch the Gilmore Girls and Kirk's Uber.
One of the first to know that I've started a new business. It's a rideshare business. I call it Uber.
Oh, there's already an Uber, Kirk.
No, not Uber. Uber. 3 O's instead of a U.
Okay, but it's
Uber.
right. But it's this
Uber. It's a service where people can request a ride. Now we'll come and pick them up.
like Uber.
Except it's Uber.
It's the same thing.
No, it's not.
Kirk, people use an app to call a car.
I have no app.
How did they get a car?
They call my mother, and then she calls me, and I find a car, and I pick them right up.
So it's a much worse version of Uber.
And it's pronounced Uber.
Stop making that sound.
All right, well, you've got my mom's number. Now, if you'll excuse me, it is past Petal's bedtime.
And this is the key point. Features are easy to copy. Experiences are much, much harder to copy. We see this a lot in our experience design work. A client will have a feature in their banking app, and it will be copied by another bank immediately. copying an experience is much harder to do because it's a unique combination of features and factors that make that experience unique. So features are easy to copy, experiences are much, much harder. And just think about that for a moment. In a few short years, we've got to the point that almost every business has a website or social media presence. These assets are no longer a differentiator and arguably are relatively easy to create and copy. With digital business being almost universal, it's often the look and the feel of how a business operates that differentiates it from its competition. An effective end-to-end experience is incredibly difficult to copy and protects a company's position. Let's look at a famous example of a company that we'll all be familiar with, and how by orchestrating exceptional end-to-end experiences, they managed to disrupt a multi-billion-dollar industry. We're talking about Apple. So to tell this story, we have to frame it by talking about Nokia. So in 2007, Nokia was worth a staggering $130 billion. Within 5 years, by 2012, their value had dropped to $17.5 billion. The next year, in 2013, Microsoft acquired them for $7.2 billion. That is a massive, massive decline. Why did this happen? Well, we think, and this is quite well known now, that Nokia were not really ready for the multiple challenges from both Apple and Android, who quickly dominated the smartphone marketplace from a standing start. This demonstrates the importance that consumers place on experience. Of course, neither Apple nor Google were small players. They were hardly startups. They were both highly accomplished businesses in their own right. But how Nokia responded to these challenges was really interesting. Firstly, Nokia open sourced its own operating system, Symbian, or at least it tried to. It also launched its own apps and content store, Ovi, in 2009. Yet Nokia had no real platform experience to compete with Apple, who'd been planning and working on their ecosystem since the launch of their iPod. Apple had planned out from the beginning how they were going to add value and therefore disrupt the market. Nokia's response when launching Ovi in 35 countries was based on the belief that we can do this in 35 countries because this is what big global businesses do. It turned out to be a disaster. Within 2 years, they closed down the Symbian open source project. As we often tell our clients, first you need to create a compelling user experience, and then you scale that experience. A trend many businesses within the Unicorn Business Club have understood and effectively implemented. However, Nokia did neither of these things. So Apple and Google disrupted Nokia because of their long-term commitment to user experience. And user experience won, which means the consumer won. Steve Jobs famously quoted, "Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works." The design is never just the fonts and the layout. The design also sits behind the functions, and that makes the experience seamless, feel intuitive. And great experiences feel natural. They're invisible most of the time. We only notice them when they don't work. At Nomensa, we call this humanizing technology, designing technology around human behavior to support human experience. The thing is, if you get it right, experience is hard to copy, which makes it even harder to disrupt. This is why so many companies work so hard getting their experiences right. So what can you do to protect your business? Focus equally on the experience surrounding your product, the setting, the buying process, every single touch point with your customers, as well as the product itself. This is what an experience economy demands of design today. Savvy business leaders are focusing on providing exceptional experiences. So how can we use insights from social media interactions and monitoring to design and deliver even better user experiences? Well, that brings us on to our next section, part 2. But before we get into part 2, let's just summarize part 1. We're all living in an experience economy. This means successful businesses need to transcend competing purely on price. And the businesses that are leading in today's economy are providing exceptional experiences. And that makes them hard to copy. That makes them more competitive. And finally, savvy business leaders embrace the demands of the experience economy. They know the factors involved in creating an experience and scaling it, because those are the ones that allow them to address the huge addressable markets that digital technology allows.
So let's dive into section 2. Next, we're going to look at how you can get UX and social to work to provide brilliant online customer experiences. Then we're going to show you that the myth of going viral is not the significant way to build large returns on social media activities and investments. We really like this imagery here at Nomensa, and we love it. It's a great way to kind of illustrate this point here. And that is that digital is absolutely everywhere. As we go about our lives, we cannot escape digital. We are leaving trails of data behind us consisting of clicks, pushes, swipes, likes, and shares. With the right approach, we can turn this data into behavioral information that reveals a rich history about who we are, where we have been, what we have done, and who we're doing it with. Understanding how we live digital lives can be turned into a business opportunity. What we tend to find here with many businesses is that while social and UX are both working really hard to deliver exceptional experiences, they tend to do it in isolation. If a business has a social team and it has a UX team, they tend to operate in silos. The social team may not even know that the UX team exists, and the UX team will have very little understanding of what social is doing. As a discipline, user experience design is focused on motivation and social media on influence. The reality is, as I've spent a lot of time in both of these environments, is that they're both two sides of the same coin. When these teams spend the time to understand each other and realize that they both have a part to play in delivering these experiences, great things tend to happen.
The FOG behavioral model shows that 3 elements must converge at the same moment for a behavior to occur. So in this graph you're looking at now, you can see motivation is plotted on the y-axis, ability is plotted on the x-axis, and the trigger or action curve runs from the top left quadrant through to the bottom right. What the model reveals is that activities which are hard to do and the ones we are not really motivated to do fall to the left of the trigger line. A great example of this would be trying to use the help section of a website to try and solve a problem with your router. Unless you're very competent, and even then, navigating your way through a website to solve a technical issue with your router can be a really hard thing to do. People are not motivated to solve problems when they're paying for a service. After all, what are they paying for? Most people would either not bother at all or give up quickly and then tweet the care team or pick up the phone to seek assistance. Consider the other side of this for just a moment. Think about the costs of managing those customer inquiries, the motivation for the business to shift that activity away from expensive call centers towards a self-serve digital environment. This represents a much more profitable option. Let's take shopping online, something we are generally a little more motivated to do. After all, we all need more things in our lives, right? But sometimes it's still not particularly easy to shop online. Whilst retail websites want us to buy from them, the process can actually be quite difficult and counterintuitive. For example, how many of you find just the product you're looking for online, but the order process is confusing and overly complicated, but you really want to complete the order? You need that thing in your life, so you overcome the barriers put in your way and work out how to do it. Consider this. Think about that from the business perspective and how that motivates them to improve their system. If they keep making sales, why should they design a better checkout experience? They have become successful in spite of themselves, or until a better user experience comes in and disrupts them. And then they are forced to play catch up. However, the reality is that most will not be able to catch up. You can't easily copy an experience. Imagine how much more business they could do if they improved their experience, resulting in lower customer attrition rates as people didn't give up during the checkout process and ultimately take their business elsewhere. Now let's consider another online transaction, similar to buying new things, but subtly different: paying a bill. Now this is something that arguably we all have a low level of motivation to do. I mean, we have to do it, but no one's going to put their hand up and say they actually want to do it. So if we're going to go and pay our bills online, it needs to be easy. Otherwise, people just give up. Consider that from the other side. Businesses don't want to spend time and resources chasing us for our missed payments. So getting it right in the beginning has real and serious financial impact. And finally, when the stars align, motivation is high and the activity is easy to do. It forms firmly to the right of the trigger line, and as a result, we are likely to do it. A good example of this is Amazon's One Click. It's a checkout that makes it really easy to buy. It removes as much friction from the process as possible by reducing buying to a single action. You see this with apps that allow people to do dating, like Tinder. Swipe to the right to say you like someone, swipe to the left to say you don't. They're collapsing an experience to a single, easy to do action that is highly motivational. It's almost too easy. And I guarantee that as a result of the design, Amazon will have less customers dropping out of the one-click process.
So now that we've considered motivation, let's have a look at the other side of the coin, influence. This is the model of influence that we look to here at Nomensa. It was work developed by Paul Adams, who was an experienced designer that used to work at Facebook. And whilst he was there, he was able to observe how influence unfolded in that environment. And Paul, he made some really interesting observations and suggests that really we all are influenced and exert influence over others, but the extent to which we influence each other is directly proportionate to the strength of the tie that we share with each other. Paul suggests that all people known to us can be organized in many ways, But to help us understand influence, we should think of ourselves as part of social groups that share common interests, such as work, hobbies, school, family. We're all familiar with the groups in which we operate and the circles in which we move. But Paul argues that it's the strength of tie we share with others in these groups that determines how much influence exists between each other. He suggests that on a daily basis, we interact with many people in social networks to facilitate this at scale. But ultimately, there's around 6 to 8 people we interact with the most. As they're the closest to us, the strength of tie is at its strongest. Both parties exert the highest level of influence over each other. The best way to think about this is when my mother tells me to do something, I really take notice. But when a distant Facebook connection I haven't seen in years pops up in my timeline with some sagely advice, it's a lot more easily dismissed. That's not to say that it doesn't have an impact, though. It's just that it's much more diluted, as the tie will be much, much weaker. So let's explore that concept a little bit further as we look at this digital trails illustration. And we used this in an article recently that Simon and I wrote for UX Matters. We'll put links and stuff in a reference slide towards the end of this, but I'll just talk you through this. This illustration, we explore the influences and trails that are created by a family trip to Legoland here in the UK. Imagine, if you will, it's the summer holidays and the kids are bored and dad wants to take them somewhere to entertain them. On Twitter, he recently saw that his sister had taken her family to Legoland and that it had a really good day. It shared pictures. You could see that they were really enjoying themselves. So when dad was sat in front of Google later that evening and searching for things to do, when Legoland came up as an option, it didn't really take him very much to make the decision to start searching, buying tickets, and finding his way on to Legoland there. But during his time at Legoland, as Dad had a Twitter account on his phone, he was sharing his experiences across the social web, and as a result of that, influenced more of his co-workers to go later that summer. So the close family ties and shared experiences influenced a number of family days. What's really interesting to me, though, is the data trails that were created and how they mirrored the behavior of those involved. So if you were Google, for example, the search history and the location data on the father's Android phone would have shown him where he was and what he was doing. If you were Twitter, the images and the geocached tweets would have shown them a similar picture. If you're Legoland, you could see through the eyes of a customer how effective your experience was delivered. The point is, there's a range of trails here, some that are public, some that are not. When looked at with the right perspective, can reveal a huge amount about behavior and experiences.
So before we head into part 3, let's just quickly summarize part 2. Digital is everywhere. It's got to the point now, it's like oxygen. You don't realize it's there until it's not. In business, it's rare, in our experience, that social and UX teams work together. They're both focused on delivering exceptional experiences, so they really should work together more. What customers take away from an interaction can be easily shared with many others. So we need to pay close attention to that information. And ultimately, sharing our experiences influences others and the decisions that they make. So in our final section of this webinar, we'll come on to what can be achieved by combining social and user experience together. We call this process social transformation. What we mean is, how can a business future-proof themselves with social media insights?
So, uncovering the value of the social web is always a matter of perspective. With so much happening in there all the time, for many, it's really, really difficult to get beyond all the white noise. But if you step back further enough, you can begin to see patterns emerging from all that chaos. For example, this is not a satellite image of the world at night, but instead this is what 500 million Foursquare check-ins look like. Just consider for a moment, each one of those pixels represents someone with their mobile phone sharing their location with others. Beyond this geographic perspective will sit many other layers of information, such as who they were with when they checked in, what were they doing, where had they been there before. The list goes on, but beyond this amazing visualization sits a plethora of experiences. If we switch perspective again, we can begin to see other familiar patterns emerging. So sticking with the geographical perspective, we can zoom from global to city view. Some of you may recognize this as Manhattan on the left and London on the right. And what we're seeing here is a time-lapse video from Foursquare that tracks check-ins across these two cities in a 24-hour period. By layering time and space, Foursquare reveal how people begin their day in the suburbs, travel into the center, and then back out again. Again, these data points will relate a depth of information about who was doing what, where, and with whom. These are the rhythms of these cities. These are the rhythms of commerce. So changing perspective again, let's shift from a geographical perspective to a chronological perspective and layer in a little bit of behavior as well. Let's take a look at this date in particular, the 2nd of February 2017, or as Foursquare like to refer to it, Fatty Solstice. So by looking at the data that they held historically, Foursquare were able to track social check-ins at gyms and fast food outlets. And what they were able to do is confidently predict the fall of visits to gyms and the rise of takeaway orders. And what they were able to show is that on the 2nd of February, everybody stopped going to the gym and everybody started going to the takeaway. They effectively predicted a rhythm of commerce. So this kind of plots it out a little bit more, and we'll link out to that as well at the end of the webinar. But this is effectively an infographic that just kind of shows how those data points intersect. It's really, really interesting what Foursquare have been able to do by looking at their data sets.
This is worth every penny.
I defy anybody to watch that without laughing themselves. But I mean, the reality is, unless you've been living under a rock recently, it's unlikely that you've not seen this viral video somewhere or heard about it in the news. Candice Payne, Chewbacca, she uploaded this video to Facebook and it went absolutely everywhere. Her joy is infectious, and Forbes reported that the mask had sold out from all online retailers in record time. It was almost impossible to get hold of one of those masks after this video went viral. And that's the kind of thing, that's the problem, the challenge that we face when decision makers think about social and business. Many are chasing the impossible dream of going viral. Everybody wants to achieve their own Chewbacca Mom moment. But those of us that are working in social media know that really that's as difficult to predict as a lightning strike. For example, if you're in the gym business, what value is a viral video to you? It's not going to help your customers to stick to their New Year's resolutions. The value would disappear as quickly as a bucket of fried chicken on Fatty Solstice. Really, the value in social media is getting to understand your customers and predicting that there's going to be a crisis that these guys are going to be going through on the 2nd of February. And that if you take the time to help them through that crisis, there's a very strong likelihood that you're going to retain a paying customer. Help them stick to their goals and help them to retain a paying customer.
So where should social sit in the design process? To understand a digital experience, we start by monitoring in order to determine how big certain issues the client might be facing actually are. Typically, there are often issues they may not even be aware of that we discover along the way. This is where the T-analysis framework really helps us, as it helps us to make sense of all the data that is out there, publicly available. The T-analysis is an approach we have designed at Nomensa to defend our clients against poor user experience and ultimately disruption. The diagram shows broad across the top versus deep social monitoring running down. So, broad analysis can reveal trends in the industry or markets, allowing a client to keep up or to lead. Deep analysis hones in on a specific problem or issue that we can begin to design a response to. For us here at Nomensa, it's not about using monitoring to show us buzz metrics, but instead, we're looking for opportunities to build better experiences and protect our clients' most valuable assets.
With the right focus in place, we can then implement a process that we call listen and respond. People tend to think about responding on social as a comms exercise. You see a customer with a problem, you reach out to them, you try to solve that problem with a carefully crafted response that attempts to take their grievance out of the public domain as quickly as possible, which is a perfectly valid way to use social media. But here at Nomensa, we tend to think about it in these terms. We think about it in terms of responding with design. Is there a process that's broken? Is there a customer journey out there that's delivering a poor experience? What is causing the problem and how do we fix it? So what we're going to do now is just spend a little bit of time dipping into the tool, and we can kind of show you what we mean. We've got a few examples in there. Maybe we can bring T-analysis to life a little bit for you. So we mentioned Legoland a little bit earlier on. So this is a monitor that we've got set up looking at Legoland. So Legoland here in the UK is one of many theme parks that you could go and visit. I'm sure across the world the picture is very much the same. You've got a selection out there. So one of the things that you can do when you're looking from a broad analysis perspective is kind of to understand how do they sit within their marketplace, what's going on. And here you can see, you can compare Legoland very, very quickly against a couple of other competitors, Alton Towers and Thorpe Park. This, quite simply, is just kind of looking at the levels of conversation that's taking place out there around these particular theme parks. And this is a very simple monitor. We're just looking at who's mentioning their Twitter accounts and what are they talking about. And you can see here that Legoland is coming in a little bit less than Thorpe Park, that's coming in a little bit less than Alton Towers. You can see that they're all doing fairly well in terms of positive sentiment. There's not huge levels of negative sentiment, nothing unexpected. When we look at Legoland through this perspective, we can see a little bit more. So this is a monitor that's been running since the 27th of June. And you can see relatively similar levels of activity throughout that time period. But over here, you've got a spike. And when we run a spike analysis, you can see if it will let us, what's going on. Here we go. Ooh. Slow. Anyway. It's a good job we prepared this a little bit earlier. So this spike is quite unusual. You'd want to investigate it a little bit further. So you can jump out to the stream view and you can see what's going on there. This relates to this tweet here. Now we talked a little bit about influencer marketing earlier on. And you can see in Nuvi in the stream view that this guy, Adam Hills, who's a well-known celebrity comedian here in the UK, just tweeted out that he was visiting Legoland for his 47th birthday. Here's that tweet here. And you can see that it got 71 retweets and 2,653 likes. So it was a very well engaged piece of user-generated content, and has obviously had quite the impact on visibility for that brand here. But what we're really interested in is not so much what Adam Hills had to say about Legoland and the fact that he was endorsing it, which is much more your traditional approach to influencer marketing. We're kind of interested in what's being said down here by the people that have got those 6 to 8 strong connections, and what part is that having in influencing other people's decisions to come along and spend their time and their money at Legoland. Here's the view of the feed, and you can kind of see just a collection of everything that's happening and being said about Legoland most recently. One of the things I like about Nuvi is the ability to filter through the search results. So we're kind of really interested actually in what people have got to say about the website. So we just have a look here. We can see it brings in all of the results. It should do. We're still logged in. That's the question.
The eternal challenge.
The eternal challenge. Let me see.
Demos.
Technology. Somebody should humanize this stuff.
You know, Peter and Simon, I made this specifically happen because I wanted to be able to address the opportunity for a customer to give back feedback on.
Of course it did. So let's try and load that page again, see what's happening. So we hit this button here. That should draw in. There we go. So you can see all the results that are coming in. We got 7,496. So if you think back to the slide a few minutes ago when we were talking about white noise, that's a huge amount of white noise. And from us as experienced designers or involved in the experience design, it's not really what we're interested in. What we're interested in are pain points, problems that people are having along particular journeys. So we're interested in designing excellent websites. So let's have a look. If we filter that down, who's actually talking about websites? So we get 27 results. So it's a lot less, but from our perspective, it's not about having huge amounts of information, but it's about gaining insights about where the problems exist so that we can focus on them much more finely with a range of user experience processes that we have. So here we've got a guy here that's talking about it'd be useful to put information on your website. We can open that up, and in fact I have done over here. So this is David Gilbert. He's asking, if we buy tickets online, do they need to be printed to gain entry? And Legoland rightly came back to him and said you can scan the barcode from your phone at the turnstiles, which is great. That's really good. But his response is perhaps useful information to put on your website, or does that say somewhere already? Now, to me, involved in user experience design, that suggests to me that they may well have a problem with their information architecture. They may well have a problem with the way that they are presenting their information. It might already exist on their website. It's just that it's not very intuitive. And as a result of it, this guy wasn't able to find it. So he had a poor experience. If we have a look down here, there's lots of people kind of asking questions that the website effectively could solve. And it all seems to be kind of information related. So here's another example that we came across. We're trying to find out about non-ride tickets, but can't see anything on your website. Have you a link, please? This is the only ticket we offer. We're sorry for any upset this caused. Again, it's pointing people to stuff that's happening on their website, but not massively helpful. So is there a problem with the design of their website? Having real trouble trying to purchase tickets online for this Sunday? Please help. So something is not quite right with that journey. So from a social media perspective, it's an early warning system. It's helping us to understand that there's a problem there that needs to be solved. Now, from an experience design perspective, this isn't necessarily telling us what is it that they were doing when they were sat in front of the computer, what buttons were they trying to press, is the information there, are they guided through that process effectively? But it helps us to understand that actually there's something that needs to be explored in a bit more depth. And this is one that kind of, again, touches an area that we're really kind of interested in. Why does your website say £139 and then the next page say £149? First time in a week, it brings up the second screen. So she's having a problem with the information that's being served up to her. This is the from price and the lowest rate for a family pass. It's not stated on your website. Also, when I called, I was told the price is brand new, but it wasn't back on the website. It wasn't. So there's a mismatch there between what information is being offered up online and what information the care team have available to them. And as a result of that, everybody's getting a pretty poor experience.
And this is pretty important from a user experience perspective as well, because people will tend to do a combination of activities to do something. So you're having a conversation, a physical conversation with someone about where to go. Where can I take my family, my children for a day out? That then might turn into some sharing of information through some form of social media technology. It then may be that the people then go on and start looking on the website, and they may do it on a laptop or a computer at home, an app. They may do it on their smartphone. The point being is that they're constantly shifting. So taking this sort of omni-channel perspective and thinking about how can you orchestrate an experience that feels consistent is a really great way to kind of keep people motivated. And also, it's kind of a really great way to influence other people, because people tend not to talk about things that are positive, especially if they're British. It's just kind of, it's expected. It's like, we would just say, why are you talking about that? It's fine, it's working. What we tend to talk about is when things aren't working. So by kind of understanding and diving into this detail, it starts to give us perspectives on what aspects of the journey do we need to design. Is it the handover between, say, a social media interaction and the website? Is it Twitter, Facebook? What sort of channel interactions do we need to understand here? Because our job is to kind of design an experience that is consistent and orchestrates all this information together. This is why we illustrate the point about Fatty Solstice, because it's these correlations of data that give us the depth of perspective that we need to think, right, what is really going on with this experience? And the beauty of social media is that we can collect data at scale. So you can imagine that we might be designing a journey, we can collect all this data at scale, and then we can look at some very specific points, and we can test those points in the lab, and then we can go back out and see if those points would be differently appreciated. Are we using the right words? Is it in the right sequence? Do people even understand? It's all about understanding what people are doing and why they're doing it. So from our perspective, this kind of correlation between influence and motivation is absolutely the heartland of user experience design.
Absolutely. When you think about Adam Hills, he's going to draw a lot of people's attention to Legoland for a very short period of time. These people that are visiting Legoland on a daily basis are all going to have their own audiences, and they're all going to be sharing their experiences. So it's important that Legoland gets it as right as they can, because what they don't want is people sharing that they've had a bad experience there, because there's lots of other places that people could take their money over the summer to spend and to entertain their kids. So this is why we're kind of really fascinated on this mirror that digital creates of the world around us and how we can use that to understand and design better experiences. Now, this we were looking at Legoland, and we started quite broad, and then we went deep into people providing feedback about a website. We've also created another monitor here that looks at another website which is a clothing retailer here in the UK called Zara. If we look at the last 14 days, this is quite a big company, and they operate. They have a range of digital assets. They also operate on the high street, so they have a huge amount of stores around the UK as well. And you can see there's a mix really between positive and negative. You can see there's quite a significant reach for this brand. 65 million achieved in 14 days is not bad going at all. And the activity is generally about the same each day. You've got 3,500 unique authors in 14 days, so there's a lot going on. But we're really kind of interested in the experiences happening around a website. So one of the things that we've been able to do with Nuvi is really kind of understand the language that is relevant to people experiencing pain along a particular journey. So we start here quite broad, looking at everybody discussing Zara. Within that, we can start to pick apart where are people having bad experiences, where are people having good experiences, and kind of hone in on that a little bit, really. And we did that, and we created a monitor that was looking really for people that are sharing bad experiences about their website. And what we can see here, when you compare the last 14 days of a deep monitor against a broad monitor, actually, I mean, this is an astronomical amount of people that are complaining about a digital experience. You've got nearly 5,000 people in general talking about this brand, but almost 1,000 of them have got something negative to say about it. So that's like 20% of all comments are not good. And most of them are related to their digital estate. And this is just an example of that monitor. So you can see here, because we're looking for people sharing bad experiences, that actually you've got a very high level of negative responses. If we go a little bit further into this monitor, just to kind of see what's going on, this is kind of how we would go about doing that. We're looking for these kinds of keywords out there and associated with the website and their digital assets. You can also compare that against a competitor. So using those same keywords, why don't we go and see whether another company out there who's in a similar marketplace are having similar problems? And we can see actually that Zara and ASOS are quite comparable. So maybe the motivation isn't there for them to do what they need to do, which is actually tidy up their experience. But here we can see lots and lots and lots of red. And this one in particular, if I hit on that, you can kind of see that when somebody's got a grievance in this environment, it goes quite a long way. There's a lot of influences kicking around in this marketplace. But again, it's about those low-level interactions. It's about those 6 to 8 people that you interact with on a regular basis that are the ones that you really want to make sure that they have the best experience possible. Moving into the deep analysis here and looking at the feed, we can just kind of see need to return an order, but website not picking it up. I've been in store and called your useless telephone line. Can you urgently look into my order that has taken a week? There's a lot of people that have got problems with this particular online experience. Worst customer service. Love Zara but hate the website. I mean, this is really quite significant feedback. So again, if we put website into here and just run a quick search, we can start to see what kind of things are coming out here. Love Zara but hate the website. Hate Zara website. Could literally buy the whole web. There's some positive stuff in there. It's difficult to get it all. Zara website is so aesthetic but not so user friendly. The Zara website is simply impractical. Why is the Zara website so annoying? It goes on and on and on. And I mean, these are just some of the examples here. Zara's website is awful, gives me a migraine. You really don't want people trying to use your website and going away and telling everybody how awful it was. But if you think back to Fogg's model, they're kind of motivated to get over the awfulness of it. Just think how much more business these guys would be doing if they made it a lot more easier, like Amazon, and reduced the friction. They got rid of all of this feedback. People would go away from Zara singing his praises a lot more. So that's just a couple of examples, really, of how you can go from a lot of information, a lot of noise, down to some really interesting observations about a particular digital asset that helps us to understand and identify where we need to focus our attention more as we go from broad through to deep. And I think that kind of takes us to the end of our webinar.
Yeah, so, you know, let's have a quick recap of the things that we think are important. So we're all living in an experience economy. Digital is pretty ubiquitous, and we believe that social and UX teams could really deliver much greater value in terms of user experience if they work together. We believe that better social experience means better customer experience. And we think that kind of creates a win-win scenario. It's good for the customer and it's good for the business. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time here at Nomensa, you know, with our clients is kind of getting them to understand it's not about responding to negative sentiment. It's about understanding what people are saying so we can fix the types of problems that they're experiencing while they're going about their kind of digital journeys. So we use the information that are generated from their digital trails to say, right, we need to fix this because it's an acquisition problem. We need to fix this because it's an onboarding problem. We need to fix this because it's actually going to help you retain more customers over the longer term and therefore increase your customer lifetime value. So we're using Nuvi and our kind of frameworks and analyses to really give us a much better perspective of the sort of social experiences, social interactions that we need to be helping our clients design for. We really hope that you've enjoyed what we've had to say today. And we're kind of, we're ready to take some questions.
Hey, Simon and Peter. This is Scott. I have a quick question that I wanted to toss out there. In your experience with this, I know, Peter, you mentioned about the kind of more everyday people, I'm going to call it, the influencers that are maybe not as popular as the comedian. What are some of the insights, or what are some of the benefits of talking to some of the smaller everyday people, influencers, or insights that they give you?
The people that are coming into contact with a digital experience on a daily basis, they do that in high volumes. So they stress test the system. If there are problems in a website and a digital experience, they will show it to you. But if you think about it in terms of the Adam Hills, that was one guy, and he was having a great time at Legoland, and he had a great experience and shared that with many. But that's only one person. There'll be thousands of other people that will have gone there during that day as well, and the collective audience of everybody else will be far bigger than Adam Hills going there that day. So by focusing on everybody else and getting them to talk positively or not talk negatively about their experience, it kind of really helps a brand to stop people being nudged away from them and to start the process of people being nudged towards them. Yeah, the other thing that kind of looking at the many people or everyday users, it kind of just shows us behavior at scale. It's kind of what I'm touching on before. what we're interested in is really kind of understanding what is it that the vast majority of people need from a digital experience, and how can we serve that to them in the most effective way. And actually, as well, once we've made a change, once we've improved a system or solved a problem, what was the impact of the changes that we made? So one of the things that I love about Nuvi is the ability to kind of take a benchmark before we even touch a client's digital estate, so we can understand what the problems are, where are they, how big are these problems, how are they being reflected back to us. And then once we've made the changes, we can go back and say, okay, now show us, did we have the impact we expected to have? Are we starting to see the dial move in the right direction? Are people complaining less about that problem? Are people starting to have a much better experience as a result of it? So it's a really good way for us to kind of quality check our work through the eyes of everyday people. And I think that for me is kind of why I really love social data. It's just the scales involved, and being able to look at the before and after picture. Does that help?
Yeah, I like that approach because I personally myself don't have the biggest following. I'm not a comedian. I'm not a I don't feel like I have a lot of social influence necessarily. But when I do take to different social channels and share either good or experiences that could be improved upon, it's from a user's perspective, it is very, as Simon talks about, humanizing technology. It really humanizes brands and companies when they reach out and say, hey, it's either sorry about that experience, or I'm glad you had a great time, or the communication one-on-one and the power of social media. I mean, we see even just with Twitter, the expanding Twitter potentially and in the process of expanding their character limit. Now, a lot of people say that's just, great, we're going to hear more. But no, it's because we want to share more. We want to be able to share more experiences and not have to blend into multiple text or multiple tweets. So I really like that perspective of getting more data from more users and not just focusing on the power user or the celebrity and their frustration or their happiness. You're actually communicating one-on-one to your audience.
And that's where the real value is not in the 1%, it's in the 99%. It's everybody else out there. Don't focus on the 1%, focus on the 99%, and you will start to see big changes. And I mean, you touched on an interesting point there from a comms perspective. Yeah, responding to your customer base openly in Twitter, across Twitter to the queries that they may have, is a really great way to turn detractors into supporters, and it's a very powerful thing, but it's also very short-lived. And if you're continuing to do that and they're continuing to raise the same problem with you over and over again, really what you should be looking for is, what is this problem that everybody's got, and how can we design a solution to that which is going to be much more long-term. So it's moving away from the short-term, immediate comms approach and learning. So you're listening and you're learning from that environment and developing a longer-term design solution, so that you don't just focus on the big players out there, you focus on everybody else. And that fundamentally is really what you should be doing with business, is not just focusing on the one or two, but focusing on the other 99%, definitely.
Great. We have another question or two here. This is from Simon White. He's listening in from Trinidad. He's asking about how do you decide what's the most important issue to tackle first? So kind of a priority. If you're seeing multiple issues, which one is the most important one, or like how do you determine where to go first?
Hi, Simon. That's a great question. It's kind of one of the questions that we help our clients answer on a daily basis. What's the first step that you need to make? What's the first analysis that you need to do? And typically what happens is that a client will have a perspective about something. I mean, let's just dive into what Pete was just saying. Now, the comms team will say, well, we've got a problem with how people are completing, let's say you can pay for a bill online. There's a problem with how people pay for their bill online. And we go, okay, how much do what data have you got? What insight can you share with us? And there could be different perspectives that they have. Now, from a comms perspective, traditionally, it will be about, right, what we need to do is we need to, if there's negative sentiment or comment, we need to address that by pushing out positive content. So essentially trying to sort of create a sort of seesaw effect. However, what we kind of tend to educate our clients doing and saying, right, it's not about trying to create these viral moments that may cover over actually a problem or an issue. It's about diving into that issue more deeply. And it is, for us, going to be a combination of many different types of research, but from a kind of a social perspective, because the amount of data available to us is so large, and because it's real-time data, it's actually data that's happen that we can get our hands on. It gives us a very good perspective of, say, for example, where in an online bill paying process there's a problem. Is it with understanding the first step that a customer needs to make? So, we could use social media to sort of start to help us frame a content problem, what we would call a micro design problem. Is it to do with a button on a page? Is it to do with the number of fields that they're thinking about? And we can then do some design work and some lab work to see if that's true, and then go back out more broadly and see if the way that we're thinking about how to sort of provide a design solution covers that. But it's this question. So, for us, we're typically, from a social media perspective, always start with this T analysis. We'll go very, very broad, and then we'll zoom in. I mean, sometimes they have very detailed insight about it. Sometimes they might have very good data or web analytic data. Sometimes they might not. And this has nothing to do with, say, the scale of the corporations that we support or the level of technology infrastructure that they have. It always comes down to how well do they understand what is happening from an experience perspective. And if they don't know what to do, what we'll kind of do is go, right, we need to kind of do a broad framing and start to see some of the issues and share some of the issues. As I said, it could be that we discover things that that they didn't know were a problem or an issue. It's really difficult. So rather than saying, right, what bit should we fix first, it's more a case of, what do we understand about how customers are interacting with the digital assets within your ecosystem? And how well are they interacting with them? And what can we do to understand what devices they're using or switching to and from? And how can we kind of start to think about how we might design that to be more coherent? So we're using this sort of social data as another layer, another input to understand how to design better experience. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that. And Simon, I hope that covers it. In me thinking about that, I like to look too at the two examples that we shared. How the Zara website was maybe giving people headaches, or was really confusing. And anytime UX or design is affecting people's ability to make purchases, I feel like that's probably the if you're e-commerce and selling things or registrations, that's anyway, from my perspective, that would be the number one issue I would tackle. But thank you so much for that that response. We had one more question here. If do you guys have just a minute or two more?
Yeah, sure.
Certainly.
This comes from Rashid. He's asking about how does a culture of a business or brand affect the UX?
Okay, this is a good question. This is a reoccurring question. So let's frame it like this. If you go back digital, a brand would be a combination of interactions that you would have with an organization. It would be their logo. It might be, if they're a store, how that store makes you feel when you go in and out, the people that you meet within the store. The brand is a combination of all of those elements. However, in a digital world, we are talking about a hyper accelerated situation. The scale of the addressable market requires that the most important thing that you have to do is you have to understand what the experience is. And this is quite a tricky thing, isn't it? You know, you ask someone, how do you design a compelling, engaging user experience? And typically people might say, well, you know, you've got to do some research, and then you might come up with customer journeys, and you might do personas and wireframes and yada, yada, yada. And I'm saying yada, 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 because they're all what we call micro tactical UX service deliverables. There's nothing strategic, nothing that combines them, that says this is the right combination, the right timing to generate the right moments, the right events, because we're living in an experience economy, that is traceable back to either a business strategy or a corporate strategy. Once you start thinking in this way, what are the factors that drive an organization? You can then start to design the experience that will support not only that corporate strategy, but more specifically, the value proposition that needs to be created. So, you know, what I'm talking about here is the difference between UX as a tactical delivery output and UX as a strategic orchestration of broad programs of work that are designed to understand what people want, to be able to give it to them in the way they want it, because that's how they want it. And that is a very, you know, that's a very, very different way to kind of approach UX. I mean, if I pose this question, I could show you, I'm a big Apple fan, I make no bones about it. I show you a corner image, right, a little slither of an Apple iPhone. What am I showing you there? A little image, but you know exactly what it is. It's an Apple iPhone. Is that brand? Is that experience? I think in a digital society, a digital experience economy, there is no real difference between brand and experience. In fact, the way that we interact with technology is as important in terms of experience, whether it be an app, as if it is that we were going into a store. So therefore, if you're a business that has a store and you have an app, the experience of understanding the choreography between app and store is as critical as either the store or the app. And this is the bit that we've illustrated, that these big organizations tend to miss that. They tend to think in very micro, silo-orientated ways about how to move elements on a page or a screen, to change words. That is not a strategic way to tackle experience design. So once you start to think about, well, what is the brand we want to create? You are essentially asking, what is the experience we want to deliver? And more specifically, what is the value proposition that anchors that experience that people are expecting? Hope that was helpful.
Well, that was fantastic. I I too am a big fan of Apple, and sometimes they set the standard so high that, especially with design and experience, that you think about all the companies and brands in the world, the few that do really focus on customer experience, like the ones you mentioned, Amazon, Apple. It really makes it such a great experience, and as a consumer, you're not afraid to go back. You look forward to going back because it's so smooth and such a great process. So those are the questions I had on my end. Simon and Peter, did you have any that you were receiving through your Twitter account, or?
Yeah, we had a few, and I think both myself and Pete would like to summarize on one point, and I think that there's a really critical factor here. When you think about what Apple has done to the world, so in 2007, they created a global inflection point. They literally changed the way that we use technology, literally. That has ushered in a whole range of disruptive businesses, which are called unicorns. These are very rare, but when one of these unicorns comes into the marketplace, they deliver a level of experience and a level of scale which makes them really hard to disrupt. And they're addressing markets that are so large that they work quite quickly. And this is the specific point. They're no longer thinking about what is traditionally in business called the profit motive, serving the highest paying customer segment. They're not even interested in the long tail. They are interested in all of the market, all of it, not a bit of it, all of it. And I want to make the example of Spotify. Whether you are a Spotify user operating under their freemium model, or whether you're a Spotify user operating on their premium model, you get the same user interface and experience. Yes, you have to bear with ads if you get the free version, but how you use their technology, the experience behind it is the same. They create one experience and they scale that. And that makes them very clever. And this was something that Apple showed them how to do this. Apple disrupted Nokia because they had one product. Nokia had many, 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 many products. So they have to support different manuals, different user interfaces. This kind of is, the kind of digitization model is about how can you design something that has exemplary experience and scale it. And this is the point that we're trying to make, that these companies will have design centers. They will be expert users of social media, of doing social media analysis. They are world class at it. You only have to look at Slack as another great example. The Slack wall of love. They are world class at celebrating feedback from their customers. So they're collecting all of this information all of the time. And this is the value of what social media provides to us for our clients. Constant feedback about how to constantly improve the experience that they want to deliver to their customers. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, that's fantastic. Let's go ahead and wrap things up here. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you to Simon Norris and Peter Kay from Nomensa for enlightening us with this great information on UX and how important it is for each one of us, as well as for the major brands, businesses, and agencies throughout the world. If you, as noted earlier, we have recorded this. We will be posting it on our Nuvi YouTube channel, as well as Nomensa will be putting on their YouTube channel as well, and Nomensa will be sharing these slides via their SlideShare. So look up Nomensa in SlideShare, and you'll be able to find the slides in the presentation. Thank you so much for attending, and Peter and Simon, you guys have a great evening over in London.
Thank you, Scott. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, everyone. And wherever you are, enjoy the rest of your day as well.
Yes, thank you very much. It's been great fun. Really appreciate doing that.